And also, I would now like you to start thinking about the projects that you are currently doing. How do we integrate as SMEs? Because with the conservation of the rhinos, that is very inclusive. And I don't know if we can integrate communities and SMEs into that. But on the farming, cattle farming, I think there could be something that the community can benefit into. So as I go back to Belynda, I would like for you to start thinking about how we can now use these examples to demonstrate how we can, where opportunities, the actual opportunities are. I would like for us to unpack the basket of opportunities, because we've got people on the call interested in how do they participate. As a corporate, how do they come together to expand on this sustainability, to expand on these opportunities? So I would like to come back to you, Belynda, and you mentioned that the process, the stakeholder engagement is informing the framework of going forward, of implementing just transition. My question is, we know that now Eskom is in the process of unlocking its land for the 100 megawatts energy opportunities. Will that form part of the framework?
The framework is meant to inform policy, and it's meant to inform the kind of incentives that might be needed, the kind of policy instruments that may be needed, skills development that may be needed. So it's intended as a policy instrument, or as a policy guideline, and also as it's a framework. So it's also meant to be a guide for stakeholders to actually implement the just transition. And we've got a stakeholder on the panel, right? So Exxaro is one of those stakeholders. Eskom is one of those stakeholders. So in that sense, yes. But it's not going to name every project or initiative that's underway. But more to, what it would do is guide Eskom on how to transition, how it should be transitioning to a more inclusive utility. And by inclusive, I would think that would mean including or creating the means and the mechanisms for local municipalities, local government, and to procure and generate their own electricity, and to have flexibility in that system to allow those municipalities that do procure their own renewable energy, for example, to be able to distribute and make that electricity accessible through the Eskom grid at tariffs that are favorable to the user, the end user, because electricity has become extremely expensive in South Africa, and also, to allow the municipalities to continue to generate the kind of revenue they need to generate to survive, and to create local job opportunities. So that's the kind of thing that the framework will be guiding. I hope that answers your question. But, it's really a framework to open up the opportunities that are created by the just transition, and to shut down the negative consequences of the just transition. So Dr. Matjila talked about, we know that we need to transition to a low carbon, or use the fossil fuel transition. Dr. Matjila, you spoke about that. But you said we have to do it sensibly, and we have to do it in a planned manner. That is to enable people not to be left behind, so that it's an inclusive process, and to ensure that people that are losing jobs, because there will be jobs lost in the transition, have opportunity to access other jobs because they've got the skills to do so, for example. So if Eskom is going to open up, for procuring renewable energy, I would suggest, and I'm now speaking on behalf of Belynda from OneWorld and not on behalf of the Presidential Commission, but I would suggest that it needs to make sure that it develops the skills in the communities for them to be able to access the jobs that are created in the renewable energy industry. If it's Eskom, you know, by the same token, I would suggest that if the mining industry were to start being more, I'm going to be a little bit controversial given we've got a mining representative on the panel, but if the mining industry were to start rehabilitating land that it impacts on in its mining operations properly at the stage of commissioning, that there are jobs that can be created for enterprises in that space, you know, to do that cleaning up of the land and restoring it for other purposes like agriculture. There are jobs created in that cleaning up, and I would then suggest that the mining industry has got a role to play in making sure that it both implements what it said it was going to do, which is clean up the land in its decommissioning, and that it enables the local communities to take up opportunities that exist in that process. So that's the kind of thing that this framework intends to guide.
Okay.
I hope that's
Can I come in, Chair?
Let me explore this first, Doc. I know that the mining space is doing a lot even around rehabilitation. I can vouch for you on that one. I just want to, under the Presidential Commission, Belynda, before we go to Doc on that one, under the Presidential Commission, what are the opportunities certainly? What are these opportunities that the Commission is seeing, and when can we see them materializing? When can we see them being implemented? What are the ideas of these opportunities? Because we've got people on the call who would like to start preparing for those opportunities. And who is responsible other than the mining? Because we've got a mining person. What are the other departments that will be affected?
Almost every government department and every segment of society will be affected by the just transition. I mean, this is an economy. South Africa's economy has grown up on mining and energy, and those two are closely related. So it's, you know, one has to use those examples because the change in that sort of composition of our economy, which is over 100 years old. You know, mining started over 100 years ago, and producing electricity from coal started in that same time frame. So this is what we are used to. And there are towns all over South Africa that are very dependent on mining. I mean, Dr. Matjila spoke about that a bit. And one of the things that we have to do, and this affects almost every department that I can think of, is, you know, from a government perspective, one of the things we have to do is position those towns that are mining dependent, and there are different ways of looking at mining dependence. But we have to transition those towns away from mining dependence. Otherwise, we're going to end up with a bunch of ghost towns. And the people that are in the room that can think about preparing for that can think about the jobs and the enterprise opportunities, SME type opportunities that exist in that transition. So I'm going to give an example. And I'll give an example that's, I think, not in the room so that I don't upset anybody. I'm not here to upset the mining industry. It's been a very important part of our economy. And I hope it will continue to be an important part of our economy going forward, but in a different way. It needs to do so in an environmentally and socially conscious way. And some mines are doing that and some are not. You know, so, and some people are sitting here thinking this is never going to happen. The transition away from coal is never going to happen, but it is going to happen. And it might not be 100% transition, but it will certainly be a phasing down of coal as the international community gains traction in the climate change space, which it is. So what are the examples? I want you to give an example of a town that, you know, that is completely mining dependent, and that's Phalaborwa. That's not the only one, but Phalaborwa, which sits on the border, it's got a gate to the Kruger National Park, has actually got very few tourism activities going on in it at the moment, other than sometimes it's a gateway into the park. That town is the jobs in that town are probably about 90% mining dependent, and that's looking at the mining value chain, not just at the mine itself. So there are two big mines there. One is phosphate, the other one is copper. And between them, they employ about 4,000 people directly. Then there are a whole lot of contractors that support the mining industry. Then the banks that are there, most of their clients are mining type clients. A fraction is tourism clients. When you talk to the bank, all they can think about is mining. And I did talk to them. I was there in December doing some research on this. I talked to all of these stakeholders that I'm talking about. The municipality is completely geared around mining. That's all that people think about. Yet, the Phalaborwa copper mine is set to shut down in 2024, between the 2024-2030 timeframe. So that's soon. And the phosphate mine is saying it can't absorb those jobs. It doesn't have the need for those jobs. So what are those people going to do in a completely mining dependent town? And what we're trying to do with them is think through the enterprise development opportunities that they could be taking up. So I think they're in the kind of example that Dr. Matjila was talking about in the wildlife industry. And supporting perhaps anti-poaching units or poaching, the poaching units in the Kruger Park and around the Kruger Park, because there's a whole belt. I mean, the thing about Phalaborwa is that it's completely surrounded by wildlife. So there's an enormous amount of opportunity there. There should be much more in tourism. They're not making anything of it because all the planning and development planning that people think about is mining oriented. It's not tourism oriented. So, I think SMEs, the youth, need to be working with the planners. I think planning needs to become more inclusive, but people need to come forward with the kinds of support that they need to get their businesses going. And there are a range of tourism type opportunities in Phalaborwa. Then there are renewable energy opportunities all over the country. This is in installation, in manufacture, in maintenance, in education and awareness campaigns. If you install a solar water heater in your house, how do you use it to maximum effect and optimize it? There are jobs in all of that. As I mentioned earlier, there are jobs in cleaning up. If Phalaborwa copper mine does close down in that time frame that I'm talking about, then there are jobs in decommissioning that mine, and there are jobs in cleaning up the land and restoring it for alternate use. What could the alternate use be? The alternate use could be to install a large-scale renewable energy plant that creates jobs, provides energy security to a municipality that has not got energy security. There are a range of opportunities that exist in that particular example. I want to just end with one more example that's perhaps a bit different or completely different to the mining. I spoke briefly about the motor industry earlier. And I just want to touch on what's happening in the motor industry that I think most people don't know about and I think need to be aware of. And again, from an opportunity perspective. But South African motor industry market is tied very much to Europe. In other words, everything that we do export, we export to Europe.
Yes.
Europe has put, and that's across the board. It's every single motor manufacturer that you can think of in South Africa, Mercedes-Benz, Volkswagen, Toyota, all of their exports are to Europe. That's important because although they need a domestic market to keep manufacturing here, the value of the export market is much greater than the value of the local market. And the local market is shrinking because the middle class is getting smaller and the income to spend on a car is reducing in South Africa. And that's been a steady decline since 2014. Now, why is this important? The Europe story is that Europe has put targets in place that they are incredibly serious about, and that is that they will convert to electric vehicles by 2035. And they are serious about that. So if we want to carry on exporting to Europe, we have to produce electric vehicles. We don't have a choice. If we don't produce those electric vehicles, that export market goes away.
Yeah.
And then the impetus for those motor companies to stay here goes away.
Sure.
Because their local market's not big enough to sustain their plants. So the transition to electric vehicles is something to take very seriously. And there are significant opportunities. So also, for example, in Port Elizabeth, that automotive industry is not just Volkswagen and General Motors, etc. It's all the component manufacturers, the people that
time manufacturers as well. Yeah.
And there are opportunities, therefore, across that value chain. And I would suggest that people that are interested in that kind of component support, motor industry, electric vehicles, battery storage packs that are needed for electric vehicles, there's some thinking to be done in terms of the opportunities in that industry, for example. Otherwise, the motor industry has finished, and the losses, the alternative is hard to contemplate. Best I stop there. I'm taking up too much airtime.
Okay. Dr. Matjila?
Yeah, so it's quite good comments from our colleague here. I just wanted to point something that Belynda is spot on about, Chair. If you were following the recent announcements in the news this morning, we heard of how Pfizer is putting in about R1 billion into South Africa in terms of the vaccine development, 950-something million rands are coming in. And so this morning, as I was driving to work, there was an interview with the director of, it's a Pfizer director for Africa and Middle East. And the question that he was asked was, why did you choose us? It was on 702. Why did you choose us? Very profound answer he gave. So South Africa has got a very good science infrastructure. We've got the R&D, we have the capacity, we're doing a lot of trials, studies. He mentioned quite a lot of work that made us an attractive destination and a partner. I'm coming back to your answer of saying, what are the opportunities that we should be seeing coming out of this journey led by the Presidential Commission? And I'll take off my hat as an Exxaro and a mining employee. I used to work for the Department of Science and Technology. And during my time there, we promulgated the National Biotechnology Strategy. And it had very specific objectives of developing the science base in the biotechnology space, funding the researchers, and allowing for economic activities that are related to biotechnology. And that policy decision informed the investments that were made by government on the infrastructure, on the science base of this country. Fast forward, how many years down the line, we're able to draw R1 billion of investment because we had the right capacity. Now, that is a role I believe should be coming out of the President's Commission, advising the right policy work. And on the right policy work, it will allow us to open up economic activities associated with this just transition. I just want to cite this example of how policy decision in 2010 to I think 2002 or so on biotechnology. I actually smiled this morning in the car. I said, there you go. You can see the benefit of a right strategic decision taken by government and funding the infrastructure, which opens up economic activity. And this is where the Presidential Commission must take us. Just give an example. We hold land, we hold billions of rands in rehabilitation funding. With the right type of policy climate, you can be innovative once you achieve your objective of corrective work of rehabilitation, but also use some of the land and the funding to spur economic activity. But that's the job of the Commission in guiding the right policy environment so that we are able to liberate. In the absence of a right policy environment, you won't struggle. I just thought I should give you that contribution.
Impressive. Now, this is the platform for you to brag about what Exxaro is doing. That's talking to SME development and the opportunities there. Can you unpack your opportunities?
Look, I'll give it in a broad framework. Exxaro, like I've just given an example on how we approach, look, a mining house, the minimum requirements of an environmental management program, EMPR. We're running our business far beyond that. I mean, the stuff that I told you about of how we were driving a rhino conservation program through the IUC and is far beyond minimum compliance requirements. That's not how we think. We think a little bit ahead of the curve, and we are in the space where there is, and it's there in the public domain, where there is a deliberate journey by Exxaro on this just transition, and one of the levers that we're looking at using is our access to land. Access to land, which is an opportunity for economic activity. So there's a program where we're engaging various stakeholders to look at land where we have no direct need of a land for our core mining activities. And typically there will be areas where mining has long ceased. And I'll be specific of the areas where such engagements are happening. It is in the KZN area, in particular in the Danhauser area, Dundee, Danhauser, because we launched closed the mine in terms of production. The land is available, and I can share the details of our managers who are responsible for that, so that there's traction on such engagement. In the Sloban or Friday area, we're having that engagement, and other parts of the country like Limpopo, where there's been some aspirations which we have stopped. So those engagements are happening, but they are on areas where we have the land. And we're looking at how can we help funny activities on the land that we have no use for.
I know that I'm currently working with a small business in Mpumalanga, but it's for your competitor on rehabilitation.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to find out with Exxaro, are there land rehabilitation projects, or are you now focusing only on mining to do rehabilitation later? What is your strategy on rehabilitation?
Look, the strategy, so let me first give you a context. In the area of sustainability, we regard it as non-competitive area. So we share sustainability, we will save health, we share across the industry. Even at the CEO's levels, there's forums where it's clear this has got nothing to do with our commercial activities. It's an area that is good for all of us. So we don't have competition, we have partners in this area, because 9 times out of 10, we'll be having neighbors. In fact, that's what at the Mineral Council, there's a type of conversations that are happening that, look, we're not talking to each other as mining companies.
Yeah.
We breed inefficiencies in some of the solutions that we have. You build a crash for this community here, the other mining house also builds a crash. No, maybe they shouldn't build a crash. Maybe they should help with the police station. That type of conversation. So the forums are there. So in the engagement of the just transition journey, they are run at the highest echelons of the mineral industry of South Africa. It's run at the Mineral Council. I mean, I was part of a delegation was it last year, where all of the senior people in the mining industry went over to Rome to talk about this just transition with the Vatican. So it's already an established terrain that is a non-competitive area. In terms of rehabilitation, so I just want to paint a broader picture of where money is on such areas. In terms of mine rehabilitation, how you approach mining rehabilitation is informed by your compliance requirement, which is the EMPR, and then you go on to a closure EMPR. Once you have it signed off as a closure EMPR, and there's a clearly defined closure objectives that are signed off by the authorities, we let it out to the market. So we've got various partners that come on site and do the rehabilitation for us. I'll give you an example of a company here in Delmas, of a lady who runs our rehabilitation. She does the leveling, she does the seeding. So it's but it's a very specific rehabilitation type of opportunities. What I said earlier on, which is a different objective, is say, look, maybe we must not think about just rehabilitating land so that we plant grass so that it can be used for farming. Maybe we must rehabilitate the land so that we can set maybe a farming activity, and we support a farmer in getting onto the land and farming. It's far more profitable than just. And maybe we must not just lock money into getting yellow equipment, getting the topsoil. Maybe we must take some of this funding that is in the rehabilitation fund and use it as support for farming activities in mine land that has been closed. And for me, this is where the Presidential Commission then comes in. Because until you change the policy framework from a DMRE, you can't touch that money. You can't touch that money and it's locked. So when you have a policy direction coming from such a commission saying, we're now allowing 20% of the money that is going to be rehabilitated to be used, then it changes the landscape. And that's where we need to be getting closer in terms of policy recommendations that are coming out of the Presidential Commission.
Okay, I like that. I like that. I think maybe we'll facilitate another conversation between the three of us because I like this synergy. I just want to. There were two questions that were asked. One was talking to money. How do we do sustainability in a way that we can afford it? And I know funding is a difficult topic. I don't know if Belynda would have an answer, but I would like for us to engage on that. How do we embark on it, make it inclusive, get funding for it, and who's supposed to fund this?
I just thanks very much for the question. I saw it in the chat. It's an important question, and I just want to tell you about an initiative that's coming that we'd also like to consult some people in this forum on. So if we can talk to Tshire and Sam about that, you know, how we just access people here so that we can engage with them. We're busy with, and this is not a Presidential Climate Commission project, this is completely different, but I think it'll be of interest to stakeholders in the room. We're working for the African Development Bank at the moment to design a credit facility for SMEs to access to fund their business startups. And we will finish the project by the end of this year. It'll take then probably another year to launch the facility. But what I would love to get inputs from this community from, because South Africa is one of the countries, there are 8 countries we're working in across the continent. But South Africa is one of them. So it would be really good to engage SMEs in the room on what kinds of things they would need to see in such a credit facility. But to answer the question specifically on, you know, how will it make sure that the SME doesn't get crippled and still be sustainable? There are different ways of looking at sustainability, and one of them is financial sustainability. And one of our considerations is how do we design this facility in a way that SMEs can access it and financially manage. And one of the options that we are thinking about for the facility is, for example, to extend holiday periods for repayment. So, for example, yes. Takes a loan, but they've got 6 months in which they don't have to make repayments, and their repayments start later. In addition to that, we're looking at making sure the interest rate on the loan is very low. So using the money that we will get from the Green Climate Fund to support this facility, using that money to guarantee loans that are low interest, including things like holiday periods. There might be other ideas that SMEs have in terms of thinking about, you know, what we can factor into the design. We're at very early stages. So I would love the opportunity to engage with people that are in the room on what they think should be inside that facility, but that's something that's coming. And I see Dr. Matjila wants to engage in this issue.
Yeah, even though I work for a mining house, I've not left my stakeholders out there, my sustainability anymore.
Do you have any money, Dr. Matjila, to put on the table?
We do have as part of our enterprise and supplier development. I will share with you the details of the custodian of that program, Dr. Njenje, and we have a process that we would have to follow to access it. We have funded agricultural activities, so it's a territory that we have been doing as part of, like I said to you, as part of enterprise development. We are a mining house. We are obliged to support enterprises in the areas that we work in, and we already have funds in that area.
Sam, I will hand over to you to do the closing remarks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Tshire, and thank you very much to our guests and speakers. Thank you very much. And I would just like to say that it has been a very insightful session, and indeed an impactful one. And, you know, hearing both of you, Dr. Joseph and Belynda, you know, I keep thinking that, you know, the topic, you know, as we framed it, social, environmental, and economic impact of just transition in South Africa, what's based on what has been discussed, what I should have included is not just impact, but also opportunities that are in just transition in South Africa. And indeed, you've done justice to that. So thank you very much for honoring the invitation and bringing a whole lot of body of knowledge and highly impactful and insightful insights to the conversation. And without any shadow of doubt, I know it has been a very worthwhile session for the entire delegates in the room. So thank you very much. Permit me, Tshire, to address our guest and say if they could give us a departing shot, or you know, their parting shot. Let's start with Dr. Joseph, while I allow Belynda to enjoy our coffee. Dr. Joseph, your parting shot, sir.
My parting shot is that the just transition journey is an inevitable journey. My general sense as a participant in the mining industry is that that understanding is in place. It's in its place by the mining sector that that's a journey that we need to embark on. In fact, we have already embarked on. We, however, have to be, you know, sensitive to who we are. And I'll be selfish and talk about my country, South Africa. High unemployment rate. You know, we still have a lot of reserves that we need to exploit. So as we embark on this broader journey of transitioning from fossil fuel, we have to do it responsibly for the benefit of our country.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Belynda, your parting shot, please.
Thank you very much. I think, yeah, I agree with Dr. Matjila, but I just want to, I think, emphasize one key point. I emphasized earlier that a just transition is not just if it's not inclusive, but I also think that people need to participate and proactively. Otherwise, I think sitting around and waiting for someone to come and tell you what to do, what to think about, what jobs you should want, etc., is not how it's ever worked, and it's not how it's going to work going forward. So I really want to say that we're pushing the inclusivity agenda, but I also want to push the participatory and proactive agenda on the part of the youth, of people that are interested in livelihoods, which I think is absolutely everybody, and to advocate for livelihoods that are sustainable. And if anyone wants more information, you're welcome to contact our office. I've given you my email address. We will help you as best we can. But I want to encourage people to be proactive and participate in this just transition journey in the same way that Dr. Matjila has described the mining industry's participation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I would like to say on top of that, that as an organization, 67 CEOs Foundation, we would galvanize the ecosystem and people that we serve within our constituency, the small businesses that is, you know, and group them, you know, and present to them the opportunities that are available. And we will continue to engage with OneWorld and obviously Exxaro and the other mining companies, so that some of these opportunities that are available are more presented in the open, and the small businesses are then able to participate adequately. Thank you very much once again, Dr. Joseph. Thank you very much, Belynda, and our amiable Tshire. Yes, please go ahead, Tshire. And you've done a brilliant job, I must say. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you to Dr. Matjila and Belynda. We have just scratched the surface because of time. I equally share in Belynda's sentiments that we were expecting a very interactive, a great interaction from the audience. But as you can see, there will be a lot of work happening. I'm super excited about the offer that Belynda put on the table. We will be following through as 67 CEOs on that, and hopefully the next conversation will address that. And as entrepreneurs, if I can challenge you to really look into interacting, because you can see this is one of the first conversations where we are expecting interaction from the audience as opposed to it being a monologue. So I'm super excited about this, that the next phase, we're hoping everybody will come prepared to understand that we need participation and active participation. So from my side, again, thank you to the audience. Thank you to Dr. Matjila and Ms. Belynda Petrie. Thank you to 67 CEOs and to the audience. Have a great day further.